What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Film Trash. Today is a little bit different. My wife is not here today. So what we're going to do is start a new segment called Let's Talk. Let's Talk is going to be featuring myself and a bunch of other people from the horror community coming to talk about a horror film. What's on the chopping block today?
Return of the Living Dead, Part 2. Just when you thought it was safe to be dead.
Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is written and directed by Kevin Wiederhorn. Kevin Wiederhorn is actually not a fan of horror films. He doesn't even really like the genre. Granted, he has done at least 3 horror films in his career. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is the sequel to Mr. Dan O'Bannon's original Return of the Living Dead. Dan O'Bannon's original Return of the Living Dead focused mainly on horror with adding bits of comedy. Return of the Living Dead Part 2, however, focused on comedy rather than horror. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 starts off as a Goosebumps-esque type of film. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 was released on January 15th, 1988 by Lorimar Motion Picture. Its budget was roughly around $6 million, and it didn't do so good at the box office, barely making over what they spent on the film. They racked in about $9.2 million. In Return of the Living Dead Part 2, it's pretty much the exact same as the original. However, they did go back in and change a few things around, but it's pretty much the same as Dan O'Bannon's original idea for the first film. A little kid named Jesse is the main center of Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And in this film, the kid is getting bullied. They take him to a mausoleum and try to lock him in. And they succeed. But also, he runs, escapes, and goes to flee in a nearby sewer. And in this sewer, you guessed it, it is the trioxin. The same barrel from the first one. The government fucked up again. And of course, kids will be kids and they start banging around on this thing. And yep, you guessed it, it opens and the trioxin is released upon the masses. And then we're treated to a bunch of great zombie effects. In Return of the Living Dead Part 2, we are treated with a whole vast array of new cast members, except for Tom Matthews and James Caan, who are not reprising their roles, as in the original, but are playing 2 similar characters. Dan O'Bannon's original film, Return of the Living Dead, was always rumored to have a sequel, so it also sparked interest in the original cast members, thinking maybe they can reprise their role in some way. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and the cast was not contacted to be in the second film. In fact, they show a lot of disdain for the film, saying it's very uninteresting, and they took the original and just remade it. In fact, Tom Matthews went on to say that the craft service was better than the second film. However, the special effects in Return of the Living Dead Part 2 are outstanding. A zombie gets punched in the face and ooze just shoots right out of his face. That's awesome. You also have a Southern Belle decapitated head. Not to mention the actual looks of the zombies are actually really well done. And to only know that they were done by like 5 main actors, I mean, come on, that's pretty cool. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 focuses mainly on comedy instead of horror, and that is why it is so lackluster in the horror community, but it has gained a cult following upon its release. Personally, I really enjoy this film. It's really funny, and if you ever go on a date, this is a perfect movie to put in and just laugh your ass off. You got great special effects, you have great laughs, and not to mention the cast is actually really great in the film. Suzanne Snyder plays Brenda, who is Tom Matthews' character's lover in Return of the Living Dead Part 2. She is one of the best parts of Return of the Living Dead Part 2. Why? Because she is so sweet behind the scenes. It really shows in her character. She really gives a lot to her character. We are introduced again to Tarman, and this time he looks a little bit different. In fact, he looks so different that he looks awful. I don't know what they were trying to do with the Tarman, but it is nowhere near compared to the original Tarman. The look and feel of Tarman is what makes him so iconic, and unfortunately, this Tarman did not have anything going for him. They did bring back the same actor who played Tarman in the original, but honestly, he didn't really care enough to even try to give it his all. One of the most memorable scenes in Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is actually the very end. At the very end, we are treated to Michael Jackson in his Thriller costume, just kind of getting shocked and falling down. And apparently that resonated with audiences and they absolutely loved it. In fact, on interviews, that is all they want to talk about, is how Michael Jackson was in Return of the Living Dead Part 2. But it wasn't actually Michael Jackson. Can you believe it? Return of the Living Dead Part 2 was released on DVD in 2004, but it had a heavily altered soundtrack. But luckily, Shout Factory stepped in, and in 2018, we have the rightful soundtrack as well as a 2K transfer of Return of the Living Dead Part 2. In conclusion, Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is what it is. Scream Factory got its hands on it, and we finally have the release it does deserve, as well as the original soundtrack. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is a cult classic, and it will remain a cult classic to the end of times. Hopefully no time soon, but I know it will. So Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is a good film, especially if you want to just have a laugh. Although it does not compare to Dan O'Bannon's original film Return of the Living Dead, it's still a hoot and it deserves to be watched. Well, anyways guys, my name is Josh Graves. Please follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and thank you for tuning in to Film Trash TV.